Hey everybody, welcome back to Choosers of the Slain. It's been a while, but we are back in action again. It's been a long enough year for everybody that I think any apologies we could make are probably already understood. So why don't we just hop right into it and talk about what our plans are going forward? Because this should be, if everything has gone according to plan, the first episode of many in 2021.
That's what we're hoping. Kind of try to get on a more regular schedule for you guys. The uh, the intention is for us to record on a regular schedule so that we can hopefully get things up to you in a as close to biweekly as possible. Is what we're aiming for. Um, so, kind of to that end, we're going into 2021. We've had about 6 months of a new edition. Um, COVID and all of the various shutdowns and social distancing have made major events a bit of a difficulty for various organizations to hold. But we do have some, trickling in data that's kind of sort of created a ninth edition meta.
Mm-hmm.
And so we figured that'd be a good way to kind of kick off, new year, new podcast as
Yeah, right.
to kind of, borrow on the hobby trope.
Yep.
Figure we could just kind of chat for a bit about the meta that's struggling to tread water in late 2020 here. So what are you thinking? Ninth edition. What's your hot take and what's your assessment of the landscape?
So I haven't gotten to play nearly as many games as I'd like, but I've been trying to keep up a little bit and noticed, I guess, a couple things. First off, big thanks to everybody in Australia for doing the whole social distancing thing and also running tournaments so we can at least see what some of the data looks like. But that being said, I did just see in some of the most recent events, Necrons are doing pretty well, so I'm excited about that since I'm still working on that first box of Indomitus. But the thing that really stands out to me is, like we talked about when they were doing all the announcements for ninth edition and everything, mobility is proving to be really important. Durability is proving to be a lot more important. Flexibility is becoming a lot more important. So you see units like like Terminators and some of those other pretty durable units that can fill a couple different roles are starting to be more useful. Stuff that you didn't necessarily see getting a lot of play in 8th edition, because 8th edition was really big on making your army focus on one thing and be really good at it, whereas 9th rewards versatility and flexibility a little more. So it's nice to see that. I also
kind of what you mentioned there, 8th edition being about focusing on something with no shots fired intended at the ITC. Unfortunately, the way across 8th edition like kills were kind of prioritized in a way that it kind of brought back the days of almost like Death Stars or the Hero Hammer, kind of like units are measured by their murderous ability.
yeah
So
and
sorry,
no, you're good. And speaking of Hero Hammer, I like that ninth edition seems less character focused. Like, characters are still useful, they still have their places, but between like how lookouts is a thing instead of the character rules being what they were in 8th, and also the way some auras got limited, and seeing the limits to your your bonuses and your penalties to most of the roles where characters are giving bonuses. It's just nice to see that it's not like, okay, so I'm going to fit in 3 troops and I'm going to fit in a couple of elites, and then how many characters can I slam into this 2,000 point list? Because it's just they're not nearly as important anymore, between how objectives work, how secondaries work, just how the game itself is functioning. So that's nice to see, in my opinion. I got kind of sick of seeing, I'm going to harp on Space Marines here, but seeing Space Marine lists where it was like, okay, here's 8 lieutenants and 4 captains and a partridge in a pear tree. Like, it's just, it got over the top there. There's no reason for 4 Space Marine captains to be 3 Space Marine captains to be on the field at once. Like, didn't make a whole lot of sense in a 2,000 point army.
Well, and it didn't help too that a partridge in a pear tree has the same silhouette as a repulsor executioner, so
Exactly.
you could just run it as a repulsor and
Right, right, exactly. Yeah, yeah, and if not that, then maybe as a chaplain dreadnought, because who
yeah,
didn't
well,
want three of those?
yeah, well, it makes sense. I mean,
Yeah,
chapters were lining up to off their chaplains to put them in dreadnoughts there for a
right,
little bit.
right. Yeah, exactly. So, but the other thing that I like to see, and it's kind of weird to look at it this way because some people saw melee as really important in Eighth Edition. Some people saw it as not all that important. I would argue that when done well, close combat was a really important phase of the game, and that it could potentially be one of the more deadly phases of the game. But you had to really know your charge and consolidate and pile in and wrap and trap and all that. All those combat shenanigans.
Hmm.
Um, Now I think melee is just as important, if not more so, but it's more about units being able to get into melee and disrupt and or be destructive, not just not just use it as a way to completely wipe out units, but use it more as a way to basically to shove an enemy unit somewhere that you, or to shove one of your units somewhere that you want it to be, and force the opposing player to to react to that and deal with it as a threat rather than just as a, oh well, I'm going to lose a bunch of stuff. It's more of a threat to their actual board position and to their victory points in a lot of cases, I
Hmm.
think.
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense. I think to kind of to your point, things have shifted to be more about the tactics and more about the unit's capabilities
Mm-hmm.
than necessarily about a mastery of the game mechanics for the phase.
Yeah.
While that's still still an issue of any strategy game is going to involve needing to like understand the rules and how they interact with everything, and to have a mastery of how each phase interacts with the mission and how your army interacts with the mission and army interacts with the phase that you're in. Like that's all important. I'm not trying to downplay that, but I will agree with you that it kind of felt guilty. I was guilty of it as the next person, but I kind of felt like Eighth Edition was about, if you knew how to wield the fight phase and the charge phase like a weapon, you were at a decided advantage.
Yeah. Yeah. I would definitely
That
agree with that.
that said, the players that um for everybody else, the shooting phase was in many ways like an easy mode. And
Mm-hmm.
so you would get, it was like the shooting phase is low risk low reward, the assault phase or the assault collective phases
Mm-hmm.
were the high risk high reward. And so if you had the player skill to wade into the assault phase, you could be very effective in eighth. But the shooting phase was so effective that you could also choose to just put it in cruise control and play the shooting phase.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
so and that felt more like game mechanics and less like factions and tactics. And
Yeah. And I think that's one place that I don't think it's a flaw in Ninth Edition per se. I think it's more that the there's some codex lag that we're seeing. So you have
mhm,
armies like Tau and Astra Militarum where they just don't have a lot of strong melee options, and they don't have a lot of strong necessarily answers to melee options. I mean,
mhm,
Tau have kept their Overwatch abilities and everything, so at least they have that going for them. But like Astra Militarum, now you're only overwatching once per charge phase, and you don't really have a good way to deal with melee. So either you're feeding stuff into a meat grinder, or you're sitting back and hoping that you can keep stuff from getting to you and just trying to survive on the shooting phase. And I think with that, some of those armies might be struggling a little more than others. I'm not positive how Astra Militarum's doing, but as far as I'm aware, there's nothing too crazy going on with them. They're not really seeing a lot of wins in
yeah,
events or anything like that. But um, I don't know. I think melee is now important enough that you need to build your list with a way to deal with it beyond I'll just stop them from getting to me. Um,
yeah,
and I think there are some armies that are struggling with that right now. I also think because of kind of the way that some of the things have been updated, lower toughness armies that don't have dedicated ways to get extra durability, or are, I guess, lower toughness elite armies. So looking at like Craft World Eldar, Drukhari to an extent. Oh, some of the other ones where you're seeing a lot of toughness 3, not high armor save, relatively expensive points.
Like Tempestus Scions, or
Yeah, stuff like that. It's just they struggle in a lot of ways because damage has, if anything, gone up. The blast rule has made it even tougher, and there's a lot of really deadly stuff in the game now. It plays faster. It's bloodier. It is riskier for the lower toughness armies, I think. And you look at like Harlequins, they're doing really well, but pretty much the entire army has a 4+ invulnerable save. So in terms of durability, sure, their toughness is low, but they're ignoring 50% of the wounds you throw at them. So
right.
You compare that to like a blob of Tempestus Scions, or a blob of witches, or something like that, where it's they have toughness 3, and also their most weapons in the game are ignoring their armor or knocking it down to like a 6+. So it's I think that's one place where a lot of codexes are probably struggling right now. I'm really interested to see how the Drukhari Codex looks when it gets redone early next year, early this year, I guess. Just because that'll be the first, if I'm remembering correctly, that'll be the first toughness 3 pseudo elite army that will have gotten an update for 9th, and it'll be interesting to see how they handle that, because we've got Necrons, which are a pretty durable army, and Space Marines got very durable with the extra wounds, and Death Guard are coming out, and they're getting even more durable. So it'll be interesting to see how they handle a glass cannon faction, if they're just going to make them cheaper, or if they're going to make them a lot more deadly, or what they're going to do there. But I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how it plays out. The, I guess, kind of weird thing about having 6 months of meta under our belt now at this point is that we've only gotten 2 codexes at this point, plus a bunch of supplements. So it's tough to say what stuff's going to look like, because we're still dealing with 8th edition codexes for most of the armies, and in particular the armies that previously were top tier are still sitting in 8th edition codexes, and it's becoming clear that the stuff that was really good in 8th edition isn't necessarily all that great in 9th.
Yeah, I think the kind of along the lines of the 8th edition codex thing, GW's stance was that the Psychic Awakening books were kind of like a stealth DLC upgrade to make everything 9th compatible. And that does explain why a handful of the codexes seem to absolutely bonkers toward the end of 8th. With just the crazy stuff they could do, like the last, I don't know what it was, the last 6 weeks of 8th edition, when the AdMech had everything from Engine War was just insane. Now that said, not every faction got the same amount of love in the Psychic Awakening books. In fact, some of them got White Dwarf articles, or like a data sheet for a named character and nothing else. And so that kind of, it leads you to think, okay, so maybe that codex was already competitive for what 9th, maybe it was already written, like the Sisters Codex, for instance. To speak to one that I'm familiar with, the Sisters Codex came out late enough in 8th that it obviously was pretty much written for 9th. And so it's easy to go, all right, that's why my Psychic Awakening was just Ephrael Stern,
right?
Instead of like a full host of abilities or whole new thingamodels or whatever. Except that doesn't necessarily translate into fitting perfectly within the kind of puzzle of ninth edition.
Yeah.
Now, Sisters is a bad example there because I've been doing all right in the handful of games I've been playing.
Yeah, they're really good in ninth.
Yeah. So I'm not not necessarily trying to use the Sisters as an example of we didn't get enough love, but just as an idea of you have some factions like orcs who the Psychic Awakening contribution that Saga of the Beast added to the orcs like felt like a whole new codex because of all
Right.
the custom jobs and all that kind of stuff. And you have like everything that AdMech got, or the like a whole new basically Inquisition mini codex in you see those things and you're like, okay, so all Necrons and Sisters got was a data sheet. So you look at Necrons and go, all right, well, they have a new codex coming, so it kind of makes sense that they're not going to put a ton of work into that. But you look further back into the earlier parts of Psychic Awakening when you have certain like Space Marine subfactions, or you have like War of the Phoenix added very little to the Eldar.
Well, and Craftworld's got a lot more than Drukhari did. I mean, the Drukhari updates were basically useless. I mean, there's just in terms of their potency, they just it wasn't worth taking.
So then you look at that and go, okay, that's kind of a better example than the Sisters were of a codex that it's quote unquote DLC to make it ninth compatible. Didn't really do anything for it in eighth, and it didn't really do anything for it in ninth. And you can't really hide behind, well, there's a new codex right around the corner, because the Psychic Awakening book that included the Drukhari came out like almost a full year before because War of the Phoenix was what, the first Psychic Awakening, or the second book?
It was the first. Came out end of 2018.
Yeah. So, far be it from me to, I guess, get out torches and pitchforks, because I tend to be, while some people might occasionally say that I white knight for Games Workshop, that's not my intention, but I try not to completely throw them under the bus, because there's things that, there's things about game development that we don't always know. And there's also game balance issues and production timelines. And there's more to it than just the game. And also, frankly, not every player really knows as much about game design or game balance as they would like to feel they do, ourselves included. And so I kind of feel like, okay, let's at least be somewhat patient or forgiving, or kind of see, it takes time to see how things even out. That said, you brought up Codex Lag. And I was kind of trying to build on this with a Psychic Awakening point, is they're definitely the new kids on the block feeling that happens every edition definitely feels more pronounced right now. And so every edition, the first couple codexes like reign supreme until everybody catches up. And then there's like the codex power creep that happens over the course of the edition, to where at the beginning, the first codexes seem really good, and then it kind of levels out. And then toward the end of the edition, the last codex is like the strongest, because they're trying out new game design ideas or whatever. And that's something that just happens because it's a cyclical process. And you just hope that this time around, you hope you're in a different place on the wheel than maybe you were last time, or but for it, I will admit that this time around, the changes to the game are pronounced enough, and the adjustments that were made inside the Space Marine milieu and the Necron Codex are profound enough that it feels like that like new codex at the beginning of the edition disruption that happens every time just feels like the waves are bigger this time. And I don't know if that means that everybody's codex is going to be changing that much, and maybe this is just what the weather is, or this is just what the temperature is now. And so as each codex comes out, it might feel that like much of a shakeup for every codex. I don't know, and we won't know that till those codexes come out. My hope, though, is that we do not go the way of Horus Heresy, where like, I know a lot of people out there love Horus Heresy, and hey, if that's the game you want to play, cool. But everyone who ever tried to sell me on Horus Heresy basically said it fixes all the imbalance of seventh edition by making everyone imbalanced. Like it was like a syndrome from Incredibles, kind of, when
Yeah.
everybody's special, no one is,
Yep.
kind of thing. And so, and I don't like that. That's why I never got into seventh, or sorry, why I never got into Horus Heresy, because even though seventh had its balance issues, I did not think the appropriate solution was just to make everyone
Yeah.
unbalanced.
Yeah.
When you have like Night Lord lists that are putting down like 40 small blast templates because of all the void mortars that they could, like, it just,
Right.
it gets to the point where it's, this would be a great computer game if a computer was doing all the math and doing all the work behind the scenes.
Mm-hmm.
This would be a fun computer game. But when you have to introduce the human element of, now we have to play this little plastic disc mini game, like, it just kind of bogs the game down.
Yeah.
And so I'm hoping that what we're seeing in the big splashes with ninth is not the herald of everybody's crazy and you get a car and you get a car and you get a,
Yeah.
like, I'm hoping we're not going in that direction.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think we are. And the rest of my comments about ninth are might even sound more favorable than what you were just expressing. I am a fan of ninth, but I tend to be, and I've said this on previous episodes, I have very specific beliefs about what good tactical doctrine is, and how forcing your opponent into uncomfortable situations or making them make meaningful choices is one of the most important things you can learn for your personal game of 40k. And so the fact that in ninth edition the movement phase is just as quote unquote deadly as the shooting phase or the assault phase, I absolutely enjoy that. I really like, before, in previous editions of 40k, you could win or lose the game in deployment.
Mm-hmm.
You could win or lose the game in the first movement phase.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of what people were doing, and I broadly say people, a lot of what players were doing
Mm-hmm.
was viewing the movement phase as the vehicle for getting into position to mete out the devastation that they were excited about in their army's pet other phase.
Yeah.
Whether it was Thousand Suns or Eldar or whomever positioning themselves for the psychic phase, or whether it was Tau or AdMech positioning themselves for the shooting phase, or it was Space Wolves and Orcs getting into position to make those charges.
Mm-hmm.
The movement phase was important, but it was important in a foundational way.
Right.
Like, it's kind of like, if you're craving like breadsticks dipped in ranch, sometimes you really got to look in the mirror and go, I really just want to eat ranch, and the breadsticks are just the vehicle, because eating ranch with a spoon is weird and gross, but like, I don't really want the breadsticks. It's that kind of thing. The movement phase is like that, where like, it's the thing that gets you to the ranch. It's not the actual, like, it's not what you're there for.
Sure.
And so it's an out there analogy, but tell me that it doesn't make sense.
I mean, it does if you like ranch
or whatever, you pick your condiment of choice. But
it's true. Yeah, I couldn't imagine just eating marinara sauce. It'd be, I'd
or
get
like,
some weird looks.
I love Frank's Red Hot, but I'm not just gonna like put it in a spoon and take it like Dimetap. You know what I mean? Like, it's, but what are you putting, Frank? Are you making nachos just because you want hot sauce? It's that kind of thing. The movement phase felt that way.
Yeah.
It was the vehicle to get to the thing you wanted to do.
Yeah.
Ninth edition, because of the way the missions are constructed, because of the way board control is really like being pushed to the forefront as an important aspect of the game.
Yeah.
Movement is its own, like, it's coming into its own. I mean, it's always been important, and it should have always been important. It should have been more important than it was.
Mm-hmm.
And so that long food-based tirade later, what I was trying to get to was the players just did not, in my experience, seem to appreciate that. The players were the ones who said, this is a vehicle to what I really want. Tactically, it should always have been important.
Yeah.
It just wasn't.
Yeah.
And I think the game encouraged that, because whether it was the ITC or whether it was GW's own missions, so much focus was on the murder.
Yep.
So much focus was on, you earn your points by killing this. Yeah, you need to hold this objective and you get victory points for holding the objective, but ultimately putting yourself on that objective and then shooting them off all of their objectives, it was more, the focus was more on getting your kill points, or getting your, for the ITC, getting your secondaries, like, Headhunter and Butcher's Bill and whatever it was you chose, Titan Slayer, whatever.
Yeah.
And I really feel like they did a much better job of reading the the room and going, the game is kind of shifted into digging your heels and shoot each other off the table, or stomp your boots across the sod and pound them into the dirt.
Yep.
And it's less about the more like tactical military aspects of like, hold this bridge,
Yeah.
or kill that power station. And so there's that aspect of it I like. I also think they looked at, especially with Mike coming from Nova and going to the organized play stuff at GWHQ, that so many of the ITC missions and Nova missions tried to make board control more important. And the people who really like took to that are the ones that you see are successful in their tournaments. And so I think that was a good development. But for GW to finally go, oh yeah, we should probably do that too, and they like assimilated it into the actual missions.
Yeah.
That I think really took the game in a direction that not only do I think is more engaging and more fun, more tactically reflective of the stories that the games are supposed to be telling.
Yeah.
But also for me personally, my play style, I tended to be more of a, tactical movement, board control. For me, I wasn't there to shoot the other guy off the table. I was there to win the game.
Right.
And so to me, it was much more important to pay attention to where my victory point total was and where my next victory point was coming from, than it was to be proud of the fact that I just took 7 more dudes out of that unit.
Yeah.
That the killing is fun and funny depending on what army you're playing, or it's brutal and gritty depending on your take on the game. But like at the end of the day, I wasn't there to subtract plastic from the other side of the table. I was there to add victory points to my side of the table.
Right.
And I think 9th edition plays more to that preference for me. So I like the edition better. And I do like that they very transparently were like, this is what we would have done with 8th if we knew, if we knew what we know now, this is what we would have done with 8th. I like that. So all of that, I guess, soapboxing aside, I do see a little bit of the old GW in some of the stuff that's happened in the last 6 months that I'm not super thrilled about.
Like what?
They went out of their way to FAQ and errata all of the flamers in the game to have a 12-inch movement, but they did not go out of their way to add core to all of the auras outside of the 2 codexes that they released. And that seems weird to me. I know in their Warhammer community article about it, they said, every army is going to see these changes because this is reflective of how 9th is supposed to be, but it will come out as the codexes come out. So they did straight up say these changes will happen over time.
Right.
And I get that allows them to have a little bit of a finer hand on the throttle as far as exactly how auras change. However, what that has resulted in is 2 codexes had their auras limited and everyone else didn't. And I just watched a game that happened in the shop. We have our gaming area is really sparse and it is set up to be very far apart from each other, but we have one table set up so that people, if they're keeping their distance and not touching each other's stuff, they can play. And I watched a game where a Chaos army was facing a Catachan army, and the Catachan army was fully able to utilize all of their characters' auras and things that they would in 8th edition. And so you have like Sergeant Harker giving rerolls to a host of tanks that are parked around him because he just gives the aura to all Catachan units.
Right.
Whereas if the Chaos player happened to be playing a Space Marine army, he wouldn't have been able to do that. His characters wouldn't be able to give his tanks rerolls. They would have to be dreadnoughts or troops because of that core requirement.
Right.
Now, in that particular game, the opponent was Chaos, so it wasn't really wasn't an issue for them. But as I was watching, they asked me for, did all auras get errated, or what's going on with this? We want to make sure we're playing it right. And so I pointed out the information to him about it, but it just kind of highlighted like, oh, if this gentleman had come in with a Marine army, his auras are just less than this other, and that's like an additional change, not additional, but additional, whereas like the Space Marine and Necron codexes are written for 9th. Astra Militarum was not.
Right.
And the plugin, the Psychic Awakening plugin that was supposed to fix it, didn't add core.
Right.
And when they announced, oh yeah, we're doing this core thing so that characters don't benefit from their own buffs and blah 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 blah, they didn't do what they did with Flamers and just do a across the board FAQ update. And if they had done an across the board FAQ update, they still could have made minor adjustments when the actual codex released,
right,
by saying, by changing what affects who, or how the wording is or whatever. And so it just seemed, it was like an echo of, it was an echo of the time from before when GW tended to be a little tone deaf about some of the changes that they would make.
Sure.
And so that struck me as like, oh no, I hope we're not going to see more things like that where, a brand new game rule is added through a codex and they don't update it across the board.
Yeah.
So that I get to run on the old operating system until my codex comes out.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I know that was kind of a lengthy rant about it, but that was something that I was not a huge fan of. If you're going to change something that major, it felt like that feels bigger to me than the range of Flamers.
Yeah. So I have to wonder if part of it was, part of it was that, obviously the way their staff is working and the amount of playtesting that they can get in with external playtesters and internal playtesters and everything is kind of limited right now.
That's fair.
I wonder if it's I have to wonder if somebody in the design studio didn't go, okay, well, adding 3 inches to all the Flamers in the game isn't going to be a huge deal, just in that if everyone gets it, then it's just something we can expect, and that's that. Like it's not like it's completely changing how armies function, but the core stuff, I really have to wonder if they just went, we don't have the resources to play test it, and we don't really want to deal with people going up and down about what should and shouldn't be core and what auras should and shouldn't affect core and all that, so we're not even going to try. I have to kind of wonder if they were in a no-win situation there and they just kind of went, well, we're going to do the one that takes less effort and has less potential for more work down the road.
I can see that, but and perhaps this is just my opinion, but I feel like if their guiding light was, let's just do what's good for now because our hands are kind of tied because of COVID and there's not a lot of events and there's not a lot of playtesting or whatever, they should have just not done it at all and then done it as a blanket rules change in a chapter approved.
Well, but I don't think they could have. I'm pretty sure the Space Marine and Necron codexes were already well out to print and everything before any of this happened.
So I guess I feel like that's more of an argument for the contrary to what you were saying then, that like if since that data was already in the codexes and the codexes were already out to print, then I don't know that it is as fair to say we weren't really sure how this was going to affect things, because if we take into consideration that the books are written 6 to 8 months before they actually release,
right,
then 6 to 8 months of codexes are already either in the oven or being pulled out of the oven, in which case they already kind of do have an idea of what's going to be in those codexes. So I feel at that point then we're right back to, it should have just been a blanket change to keep everybody, even if it was like a until temporarily stated, they put in the appendix of the big rule book, they have that list of like what weapons got blast. You know, it would have required a rules writer to sit down and spend a couple days or a couple weeks compiling data, but they could have just as easily put a PDF up that said, you know, every aura for
Right.
these
Right.
characters has core added to it. And until your codex comes out, core will be added to all of these data sheets, and just do a section for each thing.
Yeah,
And that,
I think that would have made more sense. I think doing it as an FAQ was probably part of the issue. Like I think it would have made a lot more sense for them to just do it as part of ninth edition as an upgrade.
yeah,
Definitely agree with that. Do it like do it like the blast weapons.
yeah.
I in that sense, I'm kind of surprised they didn't. I'm not surprised they didn't FAQ it after the fact. You make a good point there, though. I'm kind of surprised they didn't just say, okay, add, ninth edition comes out, all this stuff gets the blast keyword. Also, scouts and scouts are a bad example, but chaos space marines get the core keyword, and add affects core units to these auras in the Chaos Space Marine Codex. Your troops, your plague bearers, pink horrors, demonettes, and bloodletters all get core, and this aura affects them. I definitely could see that having been something that they could have just done as part of the ninth edition update that they gave to all the codexes when ninth edition came out, and have been in a better position there. I don't know that it's affecting the game all that much in terms of competitiveness, but it definitely creates some feel bad moments.
And I think that's why it bothers me so much, is because like one of their the flags that they ran up the poll at the announcement for ninth edition was 40K has too many feel bad moments.
Yeah.
And that's really what this creates. Like, is it going to hugely affect the game that a Chaos Space Marine, Chaos Lord is giving rerolls to a unit of, I don't know, Iron Warrior, Reaper, what are the autocannon tank things, or so, that's not really going to like break the game. But giving rerolls to 5 catechin tanks that are already getting to reroll the number of shots because they're catechins, that might really skew, like whether or not that those tanks get rerolls might really affect the game.
Sure.
But I do agree with you that it's definitely going to be hard to just parse out exactly which units it really matters and which units it doesn't. It's bothering me that I can't remember the name of those stupid guns, Reaper
auto
or something. I don't know what.
It's like. Are you thinking of the chain guns?
Yeah, the little the little Forge World like treaded heavy hurricane boltery looking things that Chaos can get. They come with the 2 dudes who are like characters that can't be shot.
The rapier defense platforms or whatever.
Thank you, rapiers. That's what I couldn't remember which R word it was. Anyway, now that I've completely lost my point, parsing out which units are going to be broken or which units are not going to be broken by that's a long and frankly unnecessary thing. And I wasn't trying to get into that so much, but that's why it bothered me that they didn't do a blanket update, because the whole point of the edition change was to reduce feel bad moments and make the rules clearer. And then they rolled out a pretty profound change to the game in a way that creates feel bad moments. And so that part kind of bugged me. And I think were I at the helm, I would have done like you said, in the main rule book in the appendix, just like Blast, there would have been a list of who gets core. And then in the FAQ, I would say replace, go through every codex, replace this aura with this, and just so every aura got rewritten through the 9th edition FAQ update, but the core keywords were assigned in a chart in the rule book like Blast. That should have been what happened. And that, I know we're probably 15 minutes on this point now, so I'll sum it up with, that felt like an echo of Tone Deaf Games Workshop.
Sure.
And they're not going to be perfect. Mistakes are going to happen.
Oh yeah.
But that is that was something where I was like, there was a little bit of a, ooh, you know, like when that,
Not again, not again, not again.
yeah,
Not
like,
back to the dark times.
a little bit of trauma re-experiencing.
Yeah.
You know, I flinched when that happened. But yeah, no, aside from that, like gripe, and it's an axe to grind. It's just me going like, I wouldn't have done it that way.
Sure.
Get off my lawn.
Sure.
But overall, I think ninth edition is good. I think ninth edition is good for the game. I think it's good for the players, the people who are not adapting as well to playing the mission instead of playing to table their opponent.
Mm-hmm.
They'll eventually learn. I mean,
Yeah.
the game is now encouraging them to play the way a lot of the people in their local meta were already asking them to, even if it wasn't a direct like, hey man, like, let's play more tactically, or let's play more narratively, or let's, you know what, even if nobody was directly saying to them, please stop just trying to table your opponents, it's just not as much fun.
Right.
You know, maybe that's fun for them, not trying to judge how people have fun, but I'm relatively certain in my time in this hobby, in my time having a friendly local game store and running events and things like that, whether it was direct or not, there have been requests for people to play differently.
Mm-hmm.
You know, whether it was you know, unspoken social things or whatever. And I'm really happy to see the game now asking that question too.
Yeah.
You know,
Yep.
so I really like that. I do agree with you that there are some armies that are not weathering the changes as well. You know, your glass cannon armies are in a much more tumultuous and chaotic sea, and so they're just kind of under more threat. You know, when you have your expensive T3 low armor save guys, that their whole thing is that they put out a ton of damage, but now because the boards are smaller, they're closer to the threat and they don't have as much time to put out that damage. I definitely think that we're not going to know how well they weather it till their codexes come out, and I just really hope that in the production schedule that their codexes do not come later.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure.
That would be unfortunate. I hope we see I hope it's not just Drukhari. I hope we see, like, late spring, early summer, I hope we see Craft Worlds.
Yeah, it'd be great.
I really feel like they just need, this is my opinion, I think they need to come out swinging with Eldar. I think they need to do some line refreshes, some resculpts.
Mm-hmm.
I think the Xenos races, besides just Necrons, I think the Xenos races across the board need a little bit of love, because there's been a bright beacon shining on the Imperium and Chaos for quite some time.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. But you know, we're running short on time here, but I just want to circle back real quick to your comment about the game encouraging certain play styles now and that sort of thing. I think to an extent it's kind of been interesting and a little bit refreshing to see that if you've been reading the writing on the wall and how Games Workshop has been making releases and talking about their releases for the past, I'd say at least 3 or 4 years, if not a little, you know, if not longer than that. It's been kind of clear that they've expected the game to be played a certain way, in the way they write their rules, and the way that they talk about their rules, and the way they do things in general. And the player base has not played it that way because competitively it hasn't been the most efficient way to do it. And I think it's kind of nice and definitely a change to see Games Workshop go, you know what? Fine. If you don't want to play it the way that we keep saying the spirit of the game is intended to play, this is what the letter of the game is going to be instead. So now you can play it this way. Go ahead. And mm-hmm. I find that interesting to see, and I think we're seeing that play out more and more as I see, you know, people talking about the tactics of choosing the appropriate secondaries and building your lists in a way that, you know, that you have a plan going into it. You have to mm-hmm. commit to things before you get in, and it's not that you're just going in and regardless of your opponent, this is your goal. You're going in going, okay, I need to be able to adapt, and Games Workshop has, especially if you look at, you know, points, they have put a premium on versatility in the past, and versatility was generally not all that valuable in practice. But now that's changed because of the way the game itself is written, and it's kind of nice to see that they're almost forcing the game itself to work the way they want it to, rather than writing the game and writing the rules and saying this is how we expect it to work and this is how we're designing it from this standpoint, and then have the player base go, yeah, but that's not the best way to do it, so we're going to do it the other way, and your design isn't necessarily going to be balanced now.
Well, yeah, it's kind of not to wander off into the weeds too much, but it's kind of like the whole concept of authorial intent, right?
Yeah,
like
exactly.
Like, the Games Workshop wrote the game that they wanted to write and then handed it out, and then everybody went, cool, this book is about existentialism, and they're like, no, it's not, it's about determinism or whatever.
Right.
And so the idea of the game is what we want it to be, and then we're going to expect that you play it correctly, and we're really only going to provide support to the people who are playing it the way we want them to play it. Like, I'm really happy to see a Twilight on that time.
Yeah.
And I'm happy to see them going, okay, this is obviously the game you guys wanted, so let's adapt the game in the direction that you wanted, while also kind of almost engaging with you through the community team, and also kind of pleading with you with their own marketing stuff, like, okay, we're going to adapt the game to what you're asking for, but we're also going to kind of remind you, also, don't forget this other stuff, don't forget the things that we want, don't forget the things we like. And then, instead of wagging a stick at the players like you're 40K'ing wrong, now it's just play the way you want to play. We adapted the game so that the people who want to play this way can do it, and the people who want to play the way maybe we wanted them to play can still do it.
Yeah.
Just here you go, here's your tool set, go play.
Yep.
That is, I agree with you. I think that is a great change that we've seen in the last few years from Games Workshop, because it definitely did feel like they wrote a game and it maybe didn't say what they thought it said.
Yep.
And then they got mad at everybody for not doing it the way they wanted them to.
Yep. Yeah, I definitely feel like Ninth finally crossed the threshold from, we're a company putting out a game that we want to be a serious game and is going to have a big competitive scene, but we're going to kind of write it in a beer and pretzels way, to, okay, this is like, we see what the game's become, and we need to write rules that actually support how the game has evolved. So we're gonna tighten stuff up. And is it gonna be perfect? No, absolutely not. I mean, even games that are and games that are designed from the ground up, like War Machine, designed from the ground up to be hyper competitive, still have issues like that. So it's when you have a game that has roots as far back as 40K, you're gonna have those weird artifacts, and you're gonna have designers who are like, wow, this is how it's been, so what do we do here? But it's nice to see them at least making that effort. And I think it's paying off for them.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree, because now the every slice of their customer base feels like they have a voice.
Yep. Whereas
in previous ages of the company, everybody who wasn't getting theirs at the time felt like somebody else was getting theirs, and the truth of the matter was nobody was getting theirs. So the narrative people were like, all they care about is competitive players. The competitive players are like, they never do any FAQ updates and they never change the points, so obviously they only care about narrative players. But the truth was, nobody was being fully served. And so I think this is a great move in a very positive direction. It's just going to have bumps along the road.
There's growing pains.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's kind of our take on Ninth, right? So to sort of bring it to a punchline of sorts, what army do you think from what you've seen of what meta we have right now, what do you think the strongest army is, and what do you think the two armies that need the most love are?
Ooh. Okay. That's a tough one. Uh, I think I think Harlequins, from what I've seen, are in a really good spot right now. Um, can I say they're the strongest? I'm not sure. I'd probably have to split that between Harlequins and maybe Sisters, because I think Sisters are also in a really strong spot right now. Um, in terms of the two armies that for sure need love, Craft World Eldar, absolutely. They're in a rough spot, and maybe Gene Stealer cults. Um,
Okay.
I think they're also struggling similarly in that glass cannony kind of. Their really good stuff is also kind of expensive and just not that durable. And I think you're seeing issues with that. But I also have been informed that there have been some changes made recently that maybe will be affecting that. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. But what about you?
Fair enough. I think I'm depending on who's playing them and what games I watch, like it's hard for me to pick between Harlequins, Sisters, and Custodes right
Mm,
now for which armies I think are positioned the best.
okay.
Um, I think I would tend to agree with you that it's going to be down to Sisters and Harlequins, and I think both of those armies are um if you arrange it like the good, better, best kind of thing that marketing likes to do,
Yeah,
Custodes are like the good and Harlequins are the better, and I think Sisters are the best.
I think that's fair.
But I think the player skill requirements, and please don't hear me saying this just because I'm a Sisters player, but Sisters is a complicated enough army that
Hmm.
unless you are like living and breathing it, there's a lot of things that you miss and a lot of things that you forget.
Yeah,
So I think Harlequins are aggressively good, and they're aggressively good in a way that requires less memory retention, synergy, and like pre-planning as the Sisters do.
yeah,
And then Custodians, I think, are the step down from that, which is they are like the beat stick easy mode top tier army
yeah.
because
That's fair.
you just buy a handful of dudes and then they don't die.
Yeah,
Um,
for real.
and so yeah, I mean that's what, so if I had to pick one, I would probably say Sisters.
Sure.
But as for the armies that need the most love, knee jerk, I want to say Craft World Eldar and Astra Militarum.
Okay.
But that said, I actually think it's Astra Militarum and Imperial Knights. Um, the I think that the Craft World Eldar needs so much. They need so much as far as like rules, but they also need so much as far as models. I mean, that needs a whole. The Craft Worlds just needs a line refresh, like just
Yeah.
straight up needs a line refresh.
Yep.
And the army is not doing super great right now in the competitive meta, so I don't want to discount that. I'm not trying to downplay the position that they're in, but Imperial Knights I feel were kind of hedged out of the game by the changes to the rule set. I think Imperial Knights are just a non-starter right now,
Hmm.
and
Okay.
so it almost feels like they just got benched.
Yeah, I can
And
see that.
so that like Eldar at least have options. They have, they've got like 40,000 different data sheets and Forge World things and stuff that maybe, I mean, they definitely need help. I'm not saying they don't need help, but there may be a code that can be cracked to at least limp until a line refresh
Sure.
for ninth edition. Um, Guard may be the same way. Astra Militarum might be like right now they're just kind of like but maybe somebody just hasn't figured out how you have to change how you play to fit ninth edition.
Yeah.
I think an order that allows them to skip their shooting phase so that they can overwatch if they get charged is maybe something GW should look at.
That'd be cool.
you know like an order like whites of their eyes or something, where
Mm-hmm.
because those dudes, the 10 las guns in the shooting phase isn't going to do a whole lot anyway, so skip your shooting phase, and then if somebody charges you, you get to overwatch at full ballistic skill or something, because you're basically
Right.
just pausing your shot until overwatch
Yeah.
or whatever.
Yeah.
That I think that alone would be huge for the guard. So I'll amend my answer. I'll say Craft Worlds and Imperial Knights are the two that need the most love, with honorable mention to Astra Militarum.
Okay. Fair enough.
So I totally cheated at my own question. I
That's
asked you
fine.
for three, and then I gave like 6.
That's all right. It's all subjective anyway, so
I get to write the questions. I get to
Yes.
make the rules.
Exactly.
So that's kind of our hot take on 9th for you guys, also to kind of get us back into the swing of things and get you guys used to our voices again. So what do we got, what we're looking at going forward here? We want to do we're trying to do bi-weekly content for you guys.
Yep.
And we want to try to have, we've talked about things like list discussions with very specific, like our attempts to make a competitive list and then have the other person tear it apart, or challenge each other to pick a unit that is maybe underrepresented in the game, or is thought of as like a quote unquote garbage unit, and find ways that they can be appropriately used. As we've always talked about before, discussing our own hobby progress, that kind of stuff. So what we would like to do for you guys is we would like to invite you to join us on our Discord and kind of participate in that conversation. Like, what kind of stuff do you want to hear? What do you want us to talk about? We would like to have segments or regular content, things that you can expect, things you can look forward to and enjoy, but we want to know what it is you want to hear. So come join us on Discord, and the links and information to that we'll have in the description for the video here. But if you want to give them a kind of a idea of how to find us, you're more of a Discord guy than me.
Yeah, well, I'll have the links in the description below, and you're welcome to join. We'd love to hear from you, and join us there so we can take a look at what's going on and get the conversation going.
Yeah, I think it would be great. We can, we've had some discussions before earlier this summer when we were a little bit more active. We had a lot of talks going back and forth about ways to play various units in the Sisters Army after our Sisters episode. We'd like to continue that kind of thing where we can, talk with you guys and bounce ideas back and forth. So please join us there. And also please tune in for more Choosers of the Slain. We're hoping to be more present with you in 2021 so that we can get everybody pumped and back kind of into this hobby. Everybody's been holed up in their caves making models, painting things, building things. Not a lot of play, not a lot of community, so we definitely want to do our part to give the community a shot in the arm.
For sure. Absolutely. So until next time, everybody stay safe out there and keep hobbying along.